All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're diving into an explainer on one of the most deeply debated, heavily analyzed dynamics in pop culture history. We are talking about the notoriously complex parenting style of Joe Jackson and the intense tug-of-war between survival and childhood.
Now, right off the bat, our source material acknowledges a very uncomfortable truth. Talking about Joseph Jackson is, literally, a double-edged sword. To really understand this family, we have to hold two totally conflicting ideas in our heads at the exact same time. First, yes, Joseph Jackson was absolutely not an ideal father and his methods were undeniably harsh. But on the flip side, there's this undeniable acknowledgement that his extreme strictness successfully kept his kids out of trouble. It literally shielded them from the brutal realities of street life for years. So you have this really complicated hook, right? A parent who provides this vital, life-saving shield from a dangerous environment, but does it almost entirely through fear.
So what does this actually look like in practice? Well, we see a massive psychological shift in the very nature of discipline inside the Jackson household. On one hand, you have discipline for safety. That's the survivalist protector, doing whatever it takes to keep his kids alive and off the streets. But then, there's discipline for profit. And this is where things get really fascinating. This is the exact moment the parent transitions into a cutthroat manager. That structure, which was originally meant for protection, completely warped into a rigid, unforgiving system designed to protect a financial investment.
You might be wondering, when exactly did this shift happen? The source points out that this parenting dynamic didn't actually take its darkest turn until the family entered the music business. Once those kids became a viable source of income, the entire paradigm completely flipped. They weren't just a family trying to survive day to day anymore. The children became the literal ticket out of poverty. It's actually a pretty sobering look at how introducing extreme financial opportunity can completely rewrite the DNA of a family.
And think about how this new dynamic redefined what it meant to just be a kid. Under this new management, a simple childhood mistake, tripping over a dance step or cracking a vocal note, well, that was no longer just an innocent accident. It instantly became a direct threat to the family's financial future. Imagine how drastically that shrinks the space for simple childhood joy. The children were essentially transformed from kids who were just learning and growing into high-stakes financial assets. Perfection wasn't just a goal, it was directly tied to the family's survival.
To truly grasp the weight of this, we really have to look at what was being brought into the Jackson home. The music business is notoriously brutal, right? And Joe Jackson essentially brought that cutthroat boardroom energy right into their living room. We are talking about grueling marathon rehearsal sessions, working until the break of dawn, and completely dissolving any boundary between home life and the industry. This high-pressure environment absolutely stripped the kids of anything resembling a normal childhood.
This brings us to a heartbreaking emotional climax, the total loss of a father figure. According to Michael's own recollections, there was no dad who played with them or hugged them or provided a sense of emotional safety. Instead, there was just Joseph, the boss, a man completely driven by strict demands and unyielding professional expectations. The business had just swallowed the relationship whole, creating this massive, unbridgeable psychological distance. Professional expectations completely bulldozed the parent-child bond.
But to be fair to the source material, to understand this dynamic, we have to look at the why. When you grow up with absolutely nothing, that desire to work hard and secure something, literally anything, can become completely all-consuming. It is a deeply flawed motivation for sure, but it's rooted directly in the trauma of poverty. The intense rigidity and the transactional nature of the business were born out of this frantic, desperate need to secure a future, a need that, tragically, ended up costing his kids the very childhoods he was supposedly trying to elevate.
This synthesis, presence versus absence. Let's look at how the author of our source text brings all these conflicting ideas together. This quote is a massive realization. The author points out that, despite the trauma and the immense rigidity, there's a complex form of presence when a father is actually there to guide a child, however flawed or deeply damaging that guidance might actually be. It completely challenges a simple good versus bad judgment. It asks us to weigh the incredibly heavy burden of a harsh, demanding presence against the echoing void of having no father at all. It honestly shifts the entire conversation.
So, looking at the thematic arc we've explored today, we see this really intense progression. First, you have the protector, shielding his children from a highly dangerous street environment. Second, that role mutates into the manager, protecting a financial investment at the absolute cost of childhood joy. And finally, you're left with this incredibly complex, flawed presence. A parent whose misguided, harsh attempts to secure a future still represent a tangible involvement that some people, those who grew up without fathers at all, deeply yearn for.
Ultimately, this explainer forces us to look way beyond just the Jackson family and ask a really fundamental question. What do we owe our children versus what we owe to our own survival and ambitions? It is a wildly delicate balance between securing a future and actually nurturing a child's present. I really hope this explainer has given you a fresh, structured way to think about this complex dynamic. Keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.